Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. And for the public that may be watching, we had some technical difficulties with our YouTube, and but Cogeco was still running, so we were able to capture the meeting on Cogeco. So we'll now continue from where we left off. Councillor Joyce finished his questions to the CAO, and now Councillor Ashmore, you have a question?
Yeah, question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO. The Summit Wellness Center, will they also be receiving HST credits as well? Like there's actually money coming back to them, so they'll be getting that as well. Is that correct? That'll help with their situation, with the cash flow.
Through the Mayor, yes, that's correct. Because it's a municipal facility, we're eligible for HST rebates, and we've quantified it to an amount approximately $2.5 million. So that would be a reduction on that gross budget that is cited in the report.
Thank you.
Councillor Warren?
I'll move the report as printed.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Doble? Any? Councillor Yeo, do you have a comment or a question?
No, I was just going to move the motion as well, so I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Sorry about that. All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you. Moving on, our next extraction is 1113, which is the 2026 tax policy decision. Councillor Doble, that's yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions. I note on page 3 under reassessment update, where it states on March 26th, the Ontario government tabled its 2026 budget. The Ministry of Finance has again postponed the reassessment update, meaning Ontario's property assessment system will continue to be based on January 1st, 2016 valuation, now entering its 11th year without a reassessment. In the budget, the Ontario government states it is continuing to make sure the property assessment and taxation system is working effectively for Ontario businesses and families while ensuring stability. And further, it indicates that the Ontario government continues to receive feedback on approaches that could make the property assessment and taxation system more effective from a broad range of stakeholders, including residential and business property owners, their affiliated organizations, and the professional property tax and assessment sector. I would note the following, that in fact we have many taxpayers in our city who are paying more than their fair share of taxes, and the longer we go without a reassessment update, the worse existing inequities will become. My question is with reference to the Ontario government review of the property assessment and taxation system. Does the city of Kawartha Lakes have opportunity to provide feedback into the, apparently they're studying this, and so do we have an opportunity to provide feedback, and if so, do we intend to do so?
Who's your question for?
That would be for Director Bookabum.
Thank you. Director?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Thank you for the question. The city would utilize already existing platforms such as AMO, Ontario Municipal Property Tax Collectors Association, and MFOA in order to inform our advocacy in support of those groups. Short of that, I think at any time a member can write in, a staff member or council, to seek provide our input. However, not that the province is going to take our input. Sure. So I would probably more heavily rely on the advocacy groups that we're able to influence.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I as well, I note, it's really not a question, but an observation I would note on chart on page 4 on the chart showing the city's residential assessment at 81% of our total assessment, which is really high, and the commercial, industrial, multi-residential rates at 5.2%. And I've always understood that the ideal balance between res and non-res assessment is more like 60 to 40. Our non-residential base needs to increase by about 8 times, which is ambitious to say the least. So from this report, I can only conclude that the two most effective measures to relieve the pressure on our residential tax base is number 1, a province-wide reassessment, and number 2, for council to do whatever it can to encourage and attract more commercial industrial development in the city.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Richardson.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just a quick question to Director Buchagum. So I know the report really, it shows the different subclasses that we would consider and that we wouldn't consider. I know we monitor other municipalities and are obviously tracking what could possibly benefit the city in future, and it all comes down to, growth and economic drivers. Is there any that we would consider pursuing in the future?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. On page 6 of the report, it does talk about the new multi-residential, section 3, the affordable rental housing. That is a new 2026 subclass and option under the provincial budget. And we do state there that we're reviewing those implications and determining if there is merit in the city pursuing that. So we'll undertake a more deep dive in 2026 and inform council as the year goes on. And in fact, any of these classes, should we find that other municipalities are doing them for those right reasons, economic growth, alleviation of the distribution of tax, we do analyze these annually when we bring forward the tax ratios, and they could all be under consideration.
Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you. Through you to Director Buchagum. Just the first thing is I just want to acknowledge the manager's report, and that the I believe Councillor Joyce was an advocate of this as well, as was council. We passed the low-income senior disabled person's property tax increase. I think it was a pretty small amount that it used to be $50 or $100, but it was raised to $300 and then to $350, so which is good, helpful to that class of ratepayers and people. The question I have is and I've been asked that and we've discussed it before, is waterfront owners have asked me they're feel that they're unfairly overtaxed through MPAC because they're waterfront and they don't receive the services that those that have full services do in urban areas. How are we rectifying that or trying to explain that to people, or why that is? It just seems like there's always a question, for me at least, anyways, for some folks out there that own property on waterfront, and they really they're perplexed as to why they're paying so much, and they're not receiving the full services that they would have, say, even in a former municipality that they came from, let alone here in Kawartha Lakes. Just wondering how that can be corrected someday, hopefully.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor, for that question. The property assessed value is set by the province through MPAC, the Crown agency responsible for that. The municipality simply levies the amount required to be raised through an evaluation of that weighted assessment. So when the province revisits their assessment and redistributes the property assessed values, that may have an impact on waterfront. I wouldn't want to speculate there, but the municipality has no jurisdiction over that assessed value.
Okay, and finally, in the last couple of years, the 3 years, and my colleague here, Councillor Doble, has been helping me trying to work out the situation. That in my ward, we have 2 churches that are tax commercial, and it's really been punitive amount of money that they're charged. It's not City Kawartha Lakes, it's MPAC, and City Kawartha Lakes staff have been really great to try and explain this. But there are some alternatives that the proponents or the owners are going to try and do to get back to a more sustainable, I guess, tax base that they're based on. But that really blows me away when sometimes, churches are assessed a commercially taxed rate. As far as I know, there's just the 2 churches, but is there any comment on that, or like what your thoughts are? Maybe you're not familiar with the situation, but I personally think it's not great, but we're working on a solution with the people that own the church and the congregation. But it's been a difficult situation.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to have Councillor Doble respond to the specific examples, but again, in terms of the churches and the assessed value, the only opportunity to challenge an assessed value to MPAC is through the appeal board. So I presume that's the details of these particular sites. I'm not familiar with them. My apologies, Councillor. But again, the municipality has no jurisdiction over the property assessed value. Only MPAC does, and there are avenues to make appeals through that body.
Councillor Doble.
Yes, I'm aware of the situation that Councillor Ashmore did. In fact, take me out and meet with them. The problem, to be clear, is not it's not the city's fault. It's not MPAC's fault. They're following the law. Typically, churches or what we call places of worship are tax exempt. But in order to be tax exempt, the church must be owned and occupied by the church. That is to say, if a church is renting property to hold worship services, that rental property is fully taxable. In this case, the situation is that churches are located on private property, and the properties are taxed. The situation's a little unique in a way that I don't think that the legislation anticipated that particular unique set of circumstances. But really, the only conclusion I can make, having looked into this, is to change the law. I note earlier in my earlier question, if the province is looking at the property tax and assessment system, that the way that they classify and grant exemptions may be something that they may want to look at and tweak. And this is an example that they may want to be serious in. And it's something that if we were making input to whoever, it's somebody at the Ministry of Finance is reviewing this, it's an example that I think would be worth presenting, but the question is whether we have the opportunity to present that. But ultimately, the situation it's not an MPAC problem, it's not a city problem. It really is an issue with the legislation.
Thank you. Councillor Yeo, you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I put it back down, but since you asked me, I will offer my 2 cents. I had, not that I want to get into back and forth, but Councillor Ashmore mentioned waterfront people and they don't get the services, and I take a bit of issue with that. Besides education tax, the waterfront people have the exact same services as the rest of us do. And in a lot of cases, they choose not to use those services, or they live on an extended driveway, which we call a private road. Other than that, they have every service that the city of Kawartha Lakes offers, and that's what their taxes pay for. It's unfortunate they pay as much tax as they do based on assessment, and if there's some way to introduce a new mill rate for waterfront properties, that'd be great to lower it that way. But as far as the services go, there's no difference in the service levels. Thank you.
I agree with you. And also, if you look at the assessed value of the waterfront homes and you offered to buy them for that assessed value, the owners would not accept your offer because the waterfront homes are worth considerably more than they're assessed at. So thanks for that. Deputy Mayor Richards.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question, and thanks for the conversation today around the table. You're certainly learning lots today. Just one more question to the director. How flexible is the tax policy if economic conditions worsen or growth continues to slow?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Deputy Mayor. Thank you for the question. So tax policy is set by the provincial government. This municipality has options on some of those tax subclasses. And per the report, we've given recommendations on those that are worthy of being pursued and those that we're still reviewing. So at any time, should economic growth become an issue and we redo the analysis on some of these subclasses, we can redo that analysis and bring forward a recommendation. But in terms of the subclasses or the tax ratios, the municipality has no jurisdiction in developing tax ratios. Those are set solely by the province, and they're only the ones referred to in the report.
Thank you, Director.
Does anybody want to move the recommendations? Deputy Mayor Richardson, Councillor Yeo. Did you want to speak to it at all? Or no? All in favor? And that's passed. Moving on to 1114, Councillor Ashmore, your extraction for 2025 financial year-end position.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'll just through you to Director Bookwood. My question was, and thank you for got back to me on I'm just trying to understand it clearly. For example, the general tax rate stabilization, we've got a whole bunch of categories here, and there's quite a significant amount of money here that's uncommitted, or that's what I was asking for, the uncommitteds. And also, say for example, like Fleet Reserve, Public Works, there's 2,131,000. Like those funds, they can't be put back into their operating budget, can they? Or that has to go back into the general account, or just to clarify on that, as well as all these other items, they have to go back. There's so many items here that we're dealing with, but if you could just clarify that, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So you are looking at the table of recommendations on the first and second page of the report. If you go to the appendix to the report, you will see what the ending balance in those reserves is following the utilization of those reserves. So for example, on the rate stabilization committed for Public Works, that is solely for winter control. There, at the beginning of the year, was an available balance of $2,131,473. This recommendation is recommending that you, in totality, use that reserve, and at the end of December 31st, 2025, that reserve would now be at zero. So it has been used in its entirety. It is not available to be used elsewhere. Similarly, I believe you referred to the Fleet Reserve. So the Fleet Reserve is in what we'll call the infrastructure category. At the beginning of the year, the Fleet Reserve for Public Works had $95,000 in it. This report is recommending that you utilize that $95,029 on the first page of the report as a recommendation, and therefore it will have zero in it at the end of December 31st, 2025, upon addressing the 25 deficit.
Okay, and just one more question. So the asset, or another question, the assets, for example, where it says the GL account uncommitted, asset management reserve and capital contingency reserve uncommitted. So uncommitted, where we when are we going to commit it? Like, it's sitting in like it's just sitting there right now, or when do we commit it to a particular project or account? If it says it's uncommitted, just wanted to get that clarification if I could, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, in terms of the asset management reserve uncommitted, again, in the attachment to the report, it will show the ending balance is 0. By the time you apply the $142,000 to the 2025 deficit, there will be no such reserve remaining. Similarly, I believe you touched on the capital reserve uncommitted. That is one area that we recommend you maintain a balance in order to address any tenders that may come in over through the year, any emergency that arises throughout the year, a cost pressure, or something that's needed to be done. So when it comes to the capital contingency uncommitted, we are recommending you utilize $3,781,917 and leave a balance of just over 1.1 in that reserve to allow for any anomalies that arise in 2026.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Warren, you also
I did.
extracted that report.
Yes, through you, and a question to Director Bukaboom. I did leave a message, so in the report, it says beyond market rate adjustments and overtime, the salary-related deficit is approximately $2.1 million. No single department is responsible for the wage overrun. Rather, all departments experience wage-related pressures. These impacts were driven by a combination of factors including employee backfill requirements, positions added during the year post-budget adoption, and the need to address anomalies in the original budget assumptions. So I guess I need answer to those last, these impacts were driven by a combination of factors including employing backfill requirements, positions added during the year post-budget. So I was just wondering, during budget deliberations, we talked about, and I asked questions about the number of employees that we're actually going to add. So is that kind of the background to this? I was just wondering, to find some of the overrun. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Let me go in order on page 8 of the report in regards to the 2.1 million. The employee backfill would actually be rather minimal. That occasion arises every now and then throughout the year, and normal business and service delivery needs to continue. In regards to the positions included in the 25 budget, they were just over 30 positions, and they were deferred at various points throughout the year for purpose of tax pressure alleviation. So those are included in the budget. There were just a few minor anomalies. It's hard, as you can imagine, with 1,500 employees to get it exactly right at any particular point in time. So new positions or corrections that happened in year post-budget accounted for approximately $300,000. In terms of the need to address anomalies in the budget, the city is undertaking a new practice, a best practice that allocates wages to capital projects when the city staff are the administrator or contract administrator on some of those capital projects. We're on a learning curve. We have budgeted one way that, for instance, 50% of my salary would go to a capital project in IT. We haven't quite fully aligned our practices, and so there was a difference of approximately $850,000 where wages were anticipated to go to capital projects more extensively. We are correcting that and learning from that and refining it as we go. The question you'll ask is, well, then there was an overage in wages in the operating, but they're may be surpluses in the capital side when we come to close those projects, if the full staff weren't allocated as per the anticipated budget. The last anomaly in the overall wages is that Victoria Manor was the benefactor of some increased provincial funding from the province, moving towards that increased 4 hours per resident care per patient. So while we look at wages on their own, it may have caused an increase on the wage line, but that's in isolation of knowing that the grant increased on another line elsewhere in the city budget. The Manor landed on budget for the year, so there's no overall impact to the budget. But when we isolate just wages, it does show as an increase on that particular roll-up.
Deputy Mayor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you. Maybe a comment. Obviously, being sitting around this table for almost 8 years, the city hasn't really incurred a deficit in many years. This was the perfect storm year, so to speak, right? I'm just wondering if, Director Bukaboom, I'm sure you and staff have, are being very prudent looking at ways to mitigate these type of pressures moving forward. Is there anything high level that you could share that, you're working on behind the scenes? So, hopefully we don't have to have this type of deficit moving forward. And of course, we're not going to have all these storms like we did last year.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Deputy Mayor. Thank you. I think one thing that's worth noting here is that while the city incurred a net deficit of 18.4, we really incurred a $44 million deficit when you take the $25.6 million from the provincial grant into account. So in terms of answering your question, what are we doing behind the scenes? I believe we're looking for efficiencies, we're looking for that automation and digitization, but even more importantly, we're looking for ways to increase, most particularly, the tax stabilization reserve and that environmental disaster recovery reserve. I think it would be prudent that we solve our own issues into the future. We may not be able to participate in receiving a $25.6 million help from the province. So building up those reserves to be able to be more adaptable and flexible in years of severe weather. I think it would be naive to think that we're not going to continue to incur the kinds of storms we've been incurring over the last 5 to 7 years that seem to be getting more and more climate change impactful. Finally, I think the work the city is doing on the climate change strategy and ways to mitigate and reduce some opportunities there may prove eventful in the case that we could mitigate some of these, if at all possible. Beyond that, I think we're just back to the drawing board on some good, sound financial practices and building up those reserves and managing the debt.
Councillor Warren.
Through you, thank you. And just, going forward, like the last question, the need to address anomalies in the original budget assumptions. So that's, if in the future, something like that could be spelled out a little bit. It's the language. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody like to move the recommendation? Councillor Warren. Councillor Joyce. All in favor? And that passes. Moving on to 1115, which is council remuneration. Councillor Ashmore, that's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just have a question through you to CAO, and I had a follow-up motion. So my question is, when I'm looking at these figures, you have basically 3 different categories. You have councillor, deputy mayor, and mayor. So you're basing it on 3% increase. Is it 3% plus the CPI plus the COLA, the cost of living allowance? Or are we putting it all together? Like, what in your estimate is the total amount for 1 year? Like, I'm looking at, like in one category, and two of the categories, there's like 10%. Would that be about right? Like by the time you're adding 3% plus the COLA, I call it COLA, cost of living allowance, and then the CPI. But when you're looking at one of the positions, it's, anyways, we'll get to that in a minute, but if you could sort of explain that, like, what is it, there's it two increases you're proposing in this report, like, just so we can get this understandable here, and then what's the top up after that? Like, there's a base salary increase, and then there's the inflationary and the other things that you're taking into account here. Just wanted to get the clarification if I could. Thanks.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so I guess a couple of things maybe for clarification too. So firstly, this is a standard practice that we do every term of council at this time, and it's to set rates for the next term of council. It's almost always done in this time period as well, in advance of sort of when election processes start and open up, but at the tail end of your relative term. In some cases, there's fundamental changes that will drive the recommendations going forward. So your composition may change, wards may change, the scope of work that a councillor or a deputy mayor or a mayor is legislated or expected to do may also dictate that compensation. So in this particular case, the recommendations that we're bringing forward are really predominantly status quo from my perspective. And when I say that, we're really bringing forward recommendations that look to the next term of council recommending a 3% annual increase to council, deputy mayor, council and mayor salaries. And that's entirely the increase on an annual basis that is recommended. So there's not additional inflationary COLA built on top of that. The only change, at least that we've observed through this term of council, and recently the mayor brought forward some procedure for expectations or duties of a deputy mayor. And this was something that changed from first iteration where it's an annual elected position. And so we've looked at what that net change of work would be. And so we're proposing that the deputy mayor, starting in the next term of council, that they would have a base or an added stipend of $12,000 per year on top of the council rate that they are already enjoying. I don't see any other costs. I'm not sure. I certainly would contend we're not recommending a 10% increase annually in any position. We're essentially saying a 3%, and sorry, I should have also just concluded, in the absence of sort of major changes, what guided us to this recommendation was the city's long-term financial plan and how we set compensation rates for our employees and staff as well. So in that plan, it forecasts or assumes a 3% annual increase for staff wages as well. So we took that as part of that long-term financial plan in terms of a recommendation that's in front of you.
Okay, so when I'm looking at it here, it says at the end of 2026, the total remuneration is $554,000. But if we adopt the new scale, it would go up to $632,000. That would be the total amount. But when I look at some of the different categories, excuse me, for example, deputy mayor, I calculated it was around 375% because you're going from $3,248 to $12,000. The councillor would go from $53,372 to $60,000, and mayor 124 to 139. But it's like, in my opinion, I mean, I just think that it's something that the next council can decide they want to do. The next council might. Well, I can explain this here, but I mean, can I put forward a motion if that's okay? No, we can't. Okay, that's fine. I just, okay, so, the next council could say, well, we want to go back to what we did prior to 2018, and that was rotate, what they were called back then, acting mayors. And rotate, that time there were 18 councillors, so you would have each councillor would have 2 months during the 4-year term. Now we have 8 councillors, so you would have 6 months for a 4-year term if it was alternatively rotated. So, the next council could decide to do that. That's the thing. So we're basically making a decision, I think, that the next council should be making. So I'll leave it at that. We'll see what the discussion is, but my motion is just to receive today, but I'll just leave it at that.
Maybe, so through the mayor, and for clarification, I guess I would just clarify that we're proposing a compensation rate for that deputy mayor or like position if it was considered in the future term of council to be something different, or the frequency. We would still recommend sort of an equal annual compensation. So for example, if the deputy mayor right now is elected, it's 1 year, the proposal is a net compensation or additional compensation of $12,000. If it was split into 6-month increments, we would recommend $6,000. So we're not looking at changing the fundamental compensation package. And in the report, what we're really demonstrating is the net costs for total salaries of council annually over a 4-year span. And you'll see that, again, from 27 right up to 2030. So at the end of the next 4-year term, the total cost, you're right, Councillor, would be total approximately $632,000. At the beginning of the term, the net is really about a $60,000 all expense increase over the 4-year term.
Councillor Perry, you also had this extracted.
I did, thank you, Mayor, and I want to thank staff for bringing the report forward, for thinking of councillor compensation and doing the work to bring those numbers forward. For several reasons, I'm not able to support the recommendations in the report. I'm just going to go through a few. I appreciate that the report is framed on accountability for government and responsible management of resources. But I'd argue that setting a 3% increase locked in automatically isn't necessarily the responsible management of resources. Very, very few, if any, sectors are getting a 4-year lock-in of wage increases. And I want to highlight to Councillor Ashmore's point around the fact that really compensation is a heart and soul issue for elected officials, especially around the council table. I believe strongly that, yes, we've done it this way in the past to provide and set compensation for future councils. That doesn't mean we have to do it this time. To me, they're open. The next council would be open to address that. We didn't choose to address that the past 4 years ourselves. And I think that setting this up this way can be seen as taking away some accountability, because those who it affects don't have a voice or a vote or public scrutiny on that decision. And so moving to the deputy mayor position, to me, this isn't just a salary increase, this is a policy change, right? It's not a raise, it's a policy change. When you go from 2,500 to 12,000, that's a significant policy shift, looking like remuneration. I'm not saying the workload doesn't warrant it. Councillor McDonald and I talked today about how much work is involved in growing with the deputy mayor position, and I know the mayor, you brought forth some changes as well, Mayor. To me, that kind of transformation, though, really needs to have some standalone conversations and some public transparency, not just added on as a compensation increase in this report. And last but not least, given the economic times that we're living in, 3% guaranteed for each of 4 years. We have people right here in the Kawartha Lakes struggling with the cost of living, with grocery bills, holding off repairs. People aren't getting 3% here where we live. Healthcare professionals have perhaps 2.5% and don't know what's coming next year. So I believe, at least for myself, I want to stand in solidarity with those folks at this very hard economic time, and therefore will be voting against the recommendation. Thank you.
So I'm going to weigh in and say a few things. Again, as the CAO pointed out, this is the way we've done things. And the reason we do it is, regardless of what happens, council votes for its own increases, and it's never popular. If somebody says, well, the residents should decide, we'd still be at the same rate of pay that we were at in 2001, because the residents would not give council a raise. I point out to you that it will cost the residents roughly, each resident, $12 a year to do what's being proposed. I also look at, what are your work schedules? You're basically on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You knowingly went into the job with that. I talk to residents and I say, and they say to me, I wouldn't do your job for 10 times what you're being paid, because I don't want those emails, I don't want those phone calls, I don't want, when I go out to dinner, people coming over to me and saying, can I talk to you? And I'm not happy about. They don't like it when they say they couldn't put up with it when they go to the grocery store and the same thing happens, or when they're walking down the street. You, as a council, chose to do this, but at the same time, the amount of work that council has absorbed over the term of this council and the last council is much greater than it ever was before. It really used to be a part-time job. Very shortly, in the next few years, it's going to be a full-time job. Whether you like it or not, it will be. You miss family events because you have to go and do things as a councillor. Your vacations. You take vacations when you can take them, not necessarily when you want them. You take them when it's convenient on the council schedule. In terms of an hourly rate, when you're on call 24 hours a day, you'd probably be better off working in fast food and for the pay you're getting. Also, we can talk about the CPI history and why we did what we did. When we went to 8 councillors from 4, we had to determine what a proper rate of pay would be. So we went back to 2001 and we took the CPI for the intervening years and we came up with a salary for councillors and the mayor. We said we would continue to do CPI every year because it gave the councillors the same spending power they had in 2001. When we hit COVID, there were a couple of COVID years where the CPI was over 7%. Council was not comfortable giving themselves a 7% raise during a pandemic. So they made the decision that they would either take CPI or 2%, whichever was lower. And that was and since then, it's pretty well been 2% every year. Looking at other jurisdictions and what other jurisdictions get, we are not at the top of the grade. I think that the deputy mayor, as has been pointed out, we have worked to make that a much bigger position than it ever was before. And the amount of work that the deputy mayor now must take on is significantly more than it ever was. And the $2,500 a year, frankly, is, It doesn't account for anything. So really, what you're doing is you're taking the base salary of a counselor and you're adding $1,000 to it. The increase on the tax base for what's being proposed is like 50 cents. It's hardly worth talking about. And a 3% increase for council is 0.01% of a tax levy. So it's negligible, and it is not going to impact on any of our taxpayers in a very negative way. And I know this is an election year, and I hope we're not playing politics here. So, you know, let's think about what we're doing. Putting the burden on the next council, you're asking them, they can reverse this if they like. They can look at it and say, well, it's too generous, we don't want to accept that, and change it. And I think that's where we should go, because of our history of not forcing a council to vote for their own compensation increase. So for that reason, I think we should go ahead and do it. Now, I see some other folks want to say something, so Councillor Joyce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you're speaking, I'm cribbing my thoughts because I don't want to repeat, but, you know, politicians of every stripe and level, federal, provincial, municipal, we're all underpaid, and that's okay. We go into this job knowing that. But at the very least, like to keep pace with inflation. That, I think, is a reasonable and fair request. It used to be 2% per year for many, many years, and I think Mark Carney recently said we can't go back to the old days because they're gone, and then the new normal now is 3%. And if that changes in the future to 1% or 2%, we can change this again. No problem. So it's not, I want to emphasize, this is not a salary increase, it's just keeping pace. I also going to rebut Councillor Perry that I have Statistics Canada numbers right here. Employees are not union members nor covered by a collective agreement. From 2021 to 2025 is a 20% increase in their wage earnings. Now, this is an aggregate, but that's an average of 3.6% per year over the past 5 years out there. So our own employees have got 3%, unions have got 3%. I see 3% everywhere out there. And I'm going to repeat what the mayor said is it's, I think, vital that we make this decision. We cannot put this onus on next council to vote it for themselves. We're not voting for ourselves, we're voting for the next council. That is, I think, very, very important. In terms of the deputy mayor increase, again, what is fair and reasonable? You know, a couple of years ago, a couple of councillors pulled me aside, are you interested in becoming deputy mayor? And my answer was an emphatic no, because I knew I could not take on, I didn't have the bandwidth, the capacity to take on that extra workload that a deputy mayor entails. And if I'm going to take on that workload, I want to do it right. And I knew I could not do it justice. So the answer is no. And if the increase was double, it'd still be no. It's not about the money. It's can I do the job? And I don't feel at this time I can do that. Maybe in the future, if people still want me. But a $9,500 increase on the deputy mayor salary, I think, is a just and fair, reasonable expectation, given the extra work and responsibility that comes with deputy mayor. And this, I think, believe staff did comparatives to other municipalities, so we're not out of line. So I'm in favor of this proposal that staff have come through with. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, thank you. I also agree that that we make the decision for the next council for the reasons that you just said. And if council next year doesn't want it, they can refuse it. That's how simple it is. I want to just go to the deputy mayor position, is that the councilors around this table here choose the deputy mayor to represent you for the extra work, and they commit to the extra work, and also for some projects that could help council. Some councilors have jobs and can't take on extra work and responsibility. And that's why it's left up to us sitting around this table to make that decision that who does that job. Keep in mind that last year and the last year and a half, we had a council position open, we had a councillor on leave. Who do you think did those jobs? Okay, it was a lot of work, okay? But it was okay because that's what we signed up for. We all sit here, like, we have an average of 10,000 people in each ward. That's an average. Some wards have 12,000, some have less, whatever, but an average of 10,000 people. As we grow, we're gonna have more people in our wards, which is gonna be more work for everybody. And I don't know about you, but I think this is a full-time job now. So I don't know how anybody can do it with saying they only work 24 hours a day or a week on the job. So I don't have a problem with this. Let the next, we can make that decision for next council. And if they decide they don't want it, let them decide that. Guess what? I don't want it or don't need it, or whatever the case may be, whatever each individual has, they can decide themselves. So I'll support what is recommended.
Deputy Mayor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you. I'm in agreement as well. I feel at the end of the day, you know, each term of council should not be approving its own compensation. We don't know who's going to be sitting around this table next year. And this is an opportunity, as it is every 4 years, to have this discussion. And it is about setting the terms before the election. And that way, folks that are, you know, thinking about putting their hats in understand perhaps the full compensation of what will be paid out to them if they get the seat. I think it's just, at the end of the day, there's a lot of great comments around the table just right now, and I agree with most of those, and it's just about not having the next term of council approve its own compensation. And if they choose to amend it, they have that choice.
Thank you. Councillor Warren.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I too will support it because I think the salient point is it's for the next council and it's not for ourselves. And it is a difficult situation to do that as a new council, to put it that off. And it's true that they can change it, and they changed it during COVID. So that can be done if they think that that's too much. And I know how much work, I've been around the table for a long time, and the amount of work that has increased, it's amazing. And not even as deputy mayor, but just as a councillor, it's a lot of work. And as I said, the salient point is we have to do this for the future council next year, not ourselves.
Councillor Doble.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's essentially two elements to this that I see. The first is I think we want to. I think in fairness, it's important that we keep our councillors' remuneration up to date in terms of cost of living. And I see that for over the past 4 years, there's been, I think it was a 2% increase every year. So I did a little bit of research last night too, and I went back to the OMERS website to take a look at the history of CPI over that same period of time. From 2022 to 2023, it was 6.5%. Councillors got a 2% raise. From 2023 to 2024, it was 4.47%. Councillors got a 2% raise. In 24 to 25, it only went, the CPI was 1.6%. Councillors got a 2% raise. And last year, CPI was 2% and councillors got a 2% raise. The accumulation of that over 4 years, compounded and accumulated, is probably fairly close to that. But so really for me, the question is the anticipated 3% per year reasonable? It's clear that we are in a higher inflationary period of time, whether it's a result of U.S. tariffs and other things. But if we are in an inflationary period for the next few years, 3% is probably a good guess. So I think that's fair. The second point is we're kind of redefining the remuneration for the deputy mayor position. And just hearing around the table, the added responsibility and the added workload and the added time commitment required for that is it's not insignificant. And in the past, we've been compensating the lucky holder of that role basically $50 a week to fulfill that role. I think that's clearly unreasonable and unfair, and therefore an increase to be more reflective. I think it's I think that it's a reasonable and modest attempt to accurately reflect on the increased responsibilities, and therefore I support.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Thanks very much, Mayor. And just to sum up at least my views, I want to thank you, Mayor, and my councillor colleagues for their input. I don't think anyone's disputing the amount of work I think these positions involve, and interesting in that we didn't have this on our agenda as councillors for this term. This came from a report for our consideration, and we could have if we felt that we were needing a compensation increase, despite all of the hard work that we undertake. I guess where the disagreement is coming is at a fundamental level, right? I believe that as council we should, and future councils should have autonomy and have control over their own compensation. It's not a burden to the next council. It's autonomy and accountability. And if they can just change it, then why are we setting it? If that's just going to be changed and going back. I respectfully, the mayor and I think have different perspectives on public appeal in terms of, and I know the mayor, you talked about, maybe more positions are coming, transformation of roles. To me, 3% isn't necessarily going to fix this or address it thoroughly. It's more of a public conversation that needs to be had about how much councillor that our residents want and what the actual remuneration should be. I just want to, respond to my dear colleague, Councillor Joyce, in the data that he shared. I suspect that's heavily driven by professional services and banking and tech in our urban centres across the province. Here locally, let's talk about our area, who we represent. Retail, hospitality, trades, and agricultural track are much more close to the minimum wage numbers, which I think was a 1.9% increase this year. And the living wage in Kawartha Lakes has been set at $22.20, and thousands of our constituents aren't reaching that. And guaranteeing for 4 years a compensation increase that outpaces inflation, while our families, and workers here, that kind of remains out of reach. As I mentioned, healthcare providers 2.5, not sure what next year. So to me, this is for each council to respond to the environment and the finances and the economy at the time. And it's, City Hall does sign the paychecks, but our funds come from those residents, from those people who we represent. I recognize that their schedule is full. This is certainly a full-time job. And so we're not really talking about other jurisdictions. We're looking at here at home in our own backyard. To me, it's just not the right amount or the right time, given people's hardship. And I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Does anybody want to move the recommendation?
I had a motion, if I could.
Well, let's move it. Let's see if the recommendation goes. If it doesn't go, then we'll come back to you for your motion, okay? Does anybody want to move the recommendation? Councillor Joyce, Councillor McDonald. Want to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'll just additionally point out to Councillor Perry is alluding to the hardship. I fully recognize the hardship. We're all in the same boat here with affordable, buying groceries and fuel for our cars. It's tough out there. I recognize that. I also want to point out to, in terms of minimum wage workers, that's a provincial responsibility. Our responsibility is to the taxpayer, the property taxpayer. CPP and OAS is indexed to inflation. So I just come back to that. I strongly believe this proposal proposed by staff is fair and equitable. Thank you.
That was kind of sum up.
No more comments?
Thank you.
Could I have a recorded vote, please?
Sure. Madam Clerk, recorded vote request.
Councillor Joyce.
In favor.
Councillor Doble.
In favor?
Councillor Ashmore.
Opposed?
Councillor Perry.
Opposed.
Councillor McDonald.
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Richardson.
In favor.
Councillor Warren.
In favor.
Councillor Yeo.
In favor?
Mayor Elmsley.
In favor. Vote is carried 7-2. Our next extraction is 1116, City Hall Campus Parking Impact Review. Councillor Doble, that's yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and for my councillors for their encouragement. I've been looking at this, and I had come here prepared to make a motion with respect to the configuration of the parking scheme on the city property. I'm advised that that's overstepping on this, and I certainly want to respect that. So at this point, I am prepared to receive the report, but I cannot endorse alternative 2. Essentially, it boils down to the report recommends a one-way street designation for Cambridge Street, for a short portion of Cambridge Street from Colborne Street to Francis Street. I find that to be problematic. We did have a public information session. Not many people did come, but they did. They were concerned about that, and I know that I personally feel that it would be it would serve to cause confusion and frustration for drivers on Colborne Street as well as those approaching from Cambridge Street south of Francis Street. So I can't support the change in designation from a two-way to a one-way for that short portion of Cambridge Street. The reasons around that, of course, impact on how the the parking and the inflow and outflow from the parking lot at the city property will be impacted, but and I've got some thoughts on that, but I'll address that with staff at a later date. But at this point, I am prepared to move receipt of this report, but that's all.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald?
Yeah, thank you, through you, yeah. Just to add to that, we did meet, Council Bilbo and I did meet with the group to discuss the three options. I think there is an option out there that would work. It was just a simple little change. I think it was option 3. I'm not sure 1 or 3, I think
it was option 1.
Option 1. So it was option 1 with just a couple little changes. So I have to agree with the one way also. I don't think that's is going to work, but I think we can make it work with option 1 with a couple little changes, and that's what I think. So,
Are you seconding the receive?
I'm a little concerned with option to receive, because if we receive it, that means we're going with alternation 2. Does that mean that we're going? It doesn't? Okay, we'll receive it, and then hopefully more conversations will happen. And okay, I'll do that then. I'll second that.
Is there anybody else who wants to speak to this? We have a motion to receive. All in favor? And that's passed. Does anybody want to do anything different with this report? We've only received it. Does anybody want to move the rest of the motion, or you're satisfied with just receiving it? Seeing nothing, I'm assuming that we're just receiving it. Okay, so thank you. Moving on. Councillor Doble, you have, got to do petitions. We have a request for the installation of an all-way stop at Bond Street and Cambridge Street North, and at Bond Street and Victoria Avenue North in Lindsay. A copy of the petition with 53 signatures is available for viewing at the clerk's office, and the petition was presented by Miss Julie Marquez. What is your wish?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I spoke with Ms. Marquez a couple of weeks ago, and I know that she has done a lot of organizing and work with the neighboring residents, as well as members at Cambridge United Church, which is right at the corner. And apparently there was a recent accident, at least that was reported. She reported this to me with an individual that was struck by a vehicle at that intersection. They're concerned about the traffic levels, and it would be my recommendation that we receive the petition, and that the recommendations with respect to four-way stops be referred to staff.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Yeo. Okay. Anybody want to speak to it?
Particular time frame?
When do you want it back? Third quarter?
Sure.
Okay. You good with that, Councillor Yeo? Okay. Anybody else want to speak to it? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's passed. There's no other new business. We'll move to bylaws, and Councillor Doble, I believe you have bylaws.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, moved by myself, seconded by Deputy Mayor Richardson, that the bylaws shown in section 14.1 of the agenda, namely items 14.1.1.1, 2, and including 14.2 6.1.18 be read a first, second, and third time, passed, numbered, signed, and the corporate seal attached.
All in favor? And that's passed. Okay. We'll now move into closed session. So I need a motion that the closed session agenda be adopted as circulated. Councillor Warren, Councillor Ashmore, all those in favor? And that's done. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest in closed session items? Seeing none, if there are any, advise the chair, we'll deal with them accordingly. So, at this point in the meeting, City Council will go into closed session to consider items under Section 16.3 of the agenda. As per our procedural bylaw requirements, I'm asking all electronic participants in our meeting today to confirm to me by raising their hands that they are in a private room where no other person can overhear the deliberations and the internet connection is secure and not publicly accessible. Thank you. Can I get a mover and seconder for the following motion? That council convene into closed session at 3:08 p.m. pursuant to Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act in order to consider matters identified in Section 16.3 of the regular council meeting agenda of Tuesday, April 21st, 2026, namely items 16.3.1 and 2 and including 16.3.4. Mover and seconder, Councillor Warren, Councillor McDonald, all in favor? And that's passed. At this point, the meeting broadcast will now end for members of the public watching on Cogeco, your TV cable. The live stream of the meeting on YouTube and the rebroadcast will now be temporarily paused for members of the public. When closed session is complete, the live stream and the rebroadcast of the meeting will resume to address the remaining open session items on the agenda. All remaining staff, with the exception of those involved within closed session, are now instructed to leave the electronic meeting and council chambers. Thank you very much. We'll take, let's go to 3:20. Okay. Madam Clerk, matters from closed session.
Through the mayor, matters from closed session, item 16.3.1. The confidential closed minutes for regular council meeting of March 24th, 2026 were approved. Item 16.3.2, report ML2 2026-002. Council provides staff with direction with respect to a short-term rental owner appeal. Item 16.3.3, report LGL 2026-002. Council received an update on the Arctic Over-the-Horizon Department of National Defense site. Council supported bylaw 2022-190, half load, restrictions on County Road 41, Honeysuckle Road, and Thistle Trail, remaining in place for the duration of construction of the project. Item 16.3.4, report Corp 2026-024. Council provided direction on the 2026 Accessibility Awareness Recognition Rewards. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
You don't need a motion on any of those?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Joyce, you have a confirming bylaw.
Yes, I do, Mayor. And that a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of a regular council meeting held Tuesday, April 21st, 2026, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, numbered, signed, and the corporate seal attached. This is moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Warren.
Thank you. All in favor? And that's passed. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Ashmore, seconder. Councillor Yo, you still there?
Nope.
No? Councillor Warren, all in favor? Thank you very much.